Welcome back to my channel, and with this video we are going to discuss more about a very important complex in the human body that is known as the hand complex. Many of you were eagerly waiting for this video to be out, and some of you had mentioned in the comment boxes that your examinations are approaching. So I just thought that instead of waiting for the board to be installed, I can just take a few classes like this. I hope it will be effective, and in this session we will see about the carpometacarpal joint in detail. A very simple note on hand complex. We often feel that it is a very difficult one, but it's not so. It is actually very fun and interesting to learn, and there is a great mechanism behind each and every action. For example, when you grasp your hand like this, and when you open, there is a great mechanism of a pulley system, extensor mechanism, flexor mechanism, etc. acting. It's actually fun to learn, but since we go in depth into that, you might feel it is a bit difficult to grasp, but we'll try to make it much more easy, as always in this channel, in the most simplified manner. Right, when I tell about the hand complex, I just need you to have some basic understanding about the joints in the hand complex. Okay, so you know that we have the radius here, we have the ulna here, then what we have here, that is the which one? The carpal bones. 8 carpal bones are here in this row: scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, pisiform, trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate. Always you need to remember the names of the carpal bones, because that's a very crucial with help with respect to the wrist complex or the hand complex, and they can ask you it in either viva or in a practical exam, anywhere it can be. So always try to learn the name, and there is abbreviation like she looks too pretty. Try to catch the, if you look the first letter in that, you can just write down the or bring about or remember the names of those carpal bones, right? So immediately after the carpal bones, so which are this structure known as, which these long structures are known as the carpals. After carpal, that is a metacarpal. So we have the metacarpals over here, we have the phalanges over here. See this one. Okay, so this joint between the carpals, okay, remember the carpals and the metacarpal will be known as, can you predict? Carpometacarpal. That's simple. So the first joint which comes in the hand complex is the carpometacarpal joint, which we have over here. Here we have the which you call the scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, trapezium, and the second row of the carpal bones. And after that, the carpal bones are actually articulating with the metacarpals at this CMC joint. So we have the second CMC here, third CMC, fourth CMC, fifth CMC, and first CMC over here. But first CMC or the thumb joints are a bit difficult, different from the other joints on these fingers. So we will discuss thumb later as a separate entity. And then we have this one metacarpal joints with the phalanx, that is the metacarpophalangeal joint. So that becomes the metacarpophalangeal joint, often known as the MCP joint. First MCP, second, third, and fourth MCP joint. And then you have the phalanges is joined together, that is through the interphalangeal joint, that is through the interphalangeal joint. This is the interphalangeal joint, this is the interphalangeal, this is the interphalangeal joint. And which is more close to the body, we call it as a proximal interphalangeal joint. Away from the body, we call it as the distal interphalangeal. So if I look at this finger, we have the MCP joint over here, we have the proximal interphalangeal joint, PIP joint over here, distal interphalangeal joint over here. Same with this finger, the MCP joint over here, a proximal interphalangeal here, distal interphalangeal. But in the thumb, here we have the MCP joint, but only one interphalangeal joint, no proximal and distal interphalangeal joint, but one single interphalangeal. That's because it don't have a proximal, middle, and distal phalanx. Only proximal and distal phalanx is there in the thumb. Okay, so these are some basic concept about the anatomy and joints in the human hand complex. And more specifically, I would like to say once again that is a CMC joint here, MCP joint, PIP, DIP joint. Be thorough with this one, only then you can remember and learn what we are about to learn right now. So our discussion is the carpometacarpal joint or the CMC joint of second, third, fourth and fifth digits, not the thumb. Okay, we exclude the thumb for the time being. As always, I want to ask you, which is the articulation of CMC joint, or what is the articulation of CMC joint? That's something, for example, you have the CMC joint. For a 3 marks question, you have to write what is the articulation. So CMC joints are 5 in number. It is formed from first to fifth metacarpals with the carpal bones. You can write that introduction over there, and after that you have to write like from second to fourth CMC joints behaves in a particular manner, and they are formed between. Yes, you know that right now. I told you this is a metacarpals. Metacarpals articulates with the carpal bones. All right, very good. You got it. Metacarpals articulates with the carpal bones. But is that the entire story? If you write like that, will you be able to fetch good marks? Absolutely no, because you have to go in specific. Which part of the metacarpals? This is the head of the metacarpal. This is the base of the metacarpal or tail of the metacarpal. This is the shaft of the metacarpal. Which part will articulate with the carpal bones? That's the base of the metacarpal. So you add on the another point. Don't just write the metacarpals articulates. The base of the metacarpals articulates with the carpal bones. Right? Yes, we are digging deeper and deeper. Yes, with the carpal bones. Of course, carpal bones are 80 number. Which carpal bones? That can be a general question. Which carpal bone? You have to think about like this is the proximal row of carpal bones, which will include scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, trapezium, and this would be the distal row of the carpal bones. So which row will articulate with the metacarpal? Is it the proximal row? This is the proximal and this is the distal. My index finger shows the proximal, my middle finger shows the distal. Which row is more close to the metacarpals? Definitely the distal row. So the distal row of the carpal bones articulates with the base of the metacarpal. So we added on 2 important points. That is, the base of the metacarpals articulates with the distal row of the carpal bones. And distal row of the carpal bones contains trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate. What are that? Trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate. These are the distal row of carpal bones. Now, for example, if you say glenohumeral joint, it's just one joint. But here you have second joint is there, third is there, fourth is there, fifth is there. So you have to write down which are the articulations of each and every one of them. Right? We have to write down the articulation of each and every one of them. So if you look in specific, before that, just let us just make it thorough with the distal row of carpal bones. So if you look at this diagram, you can see that the carpal bones are shown in this diagram, and this is she looks too pretty. Try to catch her. Scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, hamate, and pisiform in the proximal row itself. So this trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate is the distal row. Distal means away from the body. That one is articulating with the metacarpals. You can see very clearly from that diagram. So the base of the metacarpals are articulating with the distal row of the carpal bones, and you can write down the distal row includes the trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate. And more specifically, we are discussing only about the second, third, fourth, and fifth, not the thumb. So you can exclude the trapezium if you want. Okay. This is the proximal and distal row. The next diagram also here shows the proximal and distal row. This is a very important concept, understanding the proximal and distal row. Of course, we have discussed in detail in the hand complex, so it might be a wrist complex, so it might be easy for you. So the scaphoid, lunate, triquetrum, pisiform is the proximal row, and trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and hamate is the distal row. Coming back again to second CMC joint, that is a second metacarpal is articulating with the distal row. Second CMC joint or second metacarpals articulated with which bone in particular? Just look at this diagram and tell me second metacarpal articulates with which specific distal row of carpal bone. You can see that that is a trapezoid. Don't think that is a trapezium, because trapezium is for the first one. This one is going for articulation with the trapezium. So second metacarpal articulates with the trapezoid over here. And third metacarpal articulates with the next bone over there, that is the capitate. Third one articulates with the capitate. The fourth metacarpal articulates with, you will see it would articulate with the hamate, but at the same time it's also articulating with the capitate also. So it is articulated with the capitate and hamate. And fourth metacarpal will articulate with the last bone, that is of course the hamate itself. So you have to write in depth. So we have already understood that it is the base of the metacarpals articulating with the distal row of the carpal bones, and now we go deeper. Now we go deeper and we analyze that which is the individual, how is the individual joints formed. So second metacarpal is formed between base of the metacarpals with the base of the second metacarpal with the trapezoid one. I hope that you can see from this diagram that is from the trapezoid. And the third one, it is definitely articulating with the middle bone in the carpal bone, that is the capitated large bone over there. The capitate, you can see that it's articulating with the capitate. And then you have the hamate is articulating with the fourth metacarpal. The fourth one is only having some peculiarity because it's articulating with the hamate, it is articulating with the capitate also, a slight articulation with capitate and hamate. Fifth one definitely can only articulate with the hamate. Can only articulate with the hamate. Pisiform is not in that row, so you don't have to remember about that. This diagram can sometimes help you more into understanding this concept. So this is very important. And if you look closely in this one, you can see that the base of the second metacarpal is also articulating with the third one. Base of the third is articulating with the fourth. Fourth is articulating with the fifth. That is, the bases are actually touching each other like this at the end. So if you want to be more specific into the answer, we can write along with that trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, etc. You can write that the base articulates with each other also. The base articulates with each other also, except in this peculiar example, the first one. First one base is not articulating with the second one. Okay. That is another additional points which I don't suggest you to learn. If you find it difficult, you just can remember the other thing that is only important over here. So this is the concept of a carpometacarpal joint, and of course we have 5 carpometacarpal joint, and we specifically discuss about the 4 metacarpals. If they ask you in examination carpometacarpal joint, you have to write it along with the thumb. But if they ask you carpometacarpal joint of the fingers, you just have to write about the fingers alone. Now, every joint would have some stabilization structures. Every joint will have some stabilization structures, and just let us look into the stabilization structures in this joint. The stabilization structures are, of course, the ligaments and the capsular ligament structures, but more specifically here, the ligament. There is a ligament known as the deep transverse metacarpal ligament. You just have to remember the names. You don't have to remember about the origin insertion or the spanning of the ligament. Just remember the name. There is a ligament known as deep transverse metacarpal ligament. But this deep transverse metacarpal ligament is actually attaching through the head of your metacarpals like this. Head of the metacarpals like my finger, and will prevent any sort of abduction or any sort of excessive motion in that plane. So see, you can see that this is linking it like this. So this sort of movement, excessive movement, now these movements are free, but when there is some structure holding it like this, these movements have been restricted. So we were discussing about the CMC joint over here, but this deep transverse ligament is more related to the MCP joint. Also, it is contributing to the stability of the CMC joint. So you can write down the ligaments that provide stability to the CMC joint includes deep transverse metacarpal ligament. Of course, it's having a role in this joint, that is in the MCP joint, because it's spanning over here. I can show you that in this diagram. If you look closely into this diagram, you can see there is a deep transverse metacarpal ligament linking together at the head of second, third, fourth, and fifth metacarpals. So it is more related to the MCP joint. You can see from that diagram itself, it's more related to the MCP joint, but it has some role in stabilization of the CMC joint. And the next ligament is a transverse carpal ligament. Next ligament is the transverse carpal ligament, which is also which is a ligament seen in the flexor aspect, in the palmar aspect of the forearm. This is more related to the flexor retinaculum of the hand. So this is also a transverse ligament. So the spanning would be like this itself. The spanning would be like this itself. It is providing stability. So if you look at this diagram, you can see that a transverse carpal ligament in this diagram. very clearly. And of course, this is a diagram of cubital, carpal tunnel syndrome. It is because the median nerve is compressed in the flexor retinaculum. We will discuss that later, but at this point of time, you can remember transverse carpal ligament is more or less related to the, or more or less a part of the flexor retinaculum. It is of course attached to the capitate and the pisiform. It is attached, hamate and the pisiform, and scaphoid and the trapezium. If you want, you can remember that. Otherwise, you can just forget. Just write down it directs, or it runs in a transverse direction. And the last ligament in this complex is a very simple ligament known as the intercarpal ligament. What is that? The intercarpal ligament. The intercarpal ligaments, of course, dorsal intercarpal, volar intercarpal, all are there. You don't have to remember that. You just remember there is intercarpal ligaments linking the carpal bones each other. So we discussed what is the articulations, then we go on what are the stabilization factors, where we have the 3 steps of stabilization. Only remember the names: deep transverse metacarpal ligament, transverse carpal ligament, and intercarpal ligaments. Okay, 2 transverse, 1 like this, and 1 intercarpal, linking the bones together. I hope that is clear, right? And then something more important in this, or something which we need to add on with the carpometacarpal joint, is the mobility of the carpometacarpal joint. Of course, every joint we need to discuss the mobility. So how can you define the mobility of a CMC joint? The first, second, third, fourth, and fifth CMC. How can you define the mobility? When you look at these joints, you can see that the mobility increases from 2nd to 5th metacarpal. Of course, you can see that a greater amount of mobility is there at the carpometacarpal joint of the 2nd, 5th one. And if you look at 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers or CMC joint, they are plain joints, plain synovial joints. 2nd, 3rd, and 4th is plain synovial joint, and thus they have only 1 degree of freedom, that is the flexion and extension. So the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th joints are a plain synovial joint, and of course they have only 1 degree of freedom, that is of course the the flexion and extension. And fifth joint is a saddle shaped joint, and it has flexion and extension and some amount of abduction adduction. Now, for example, like the sternoclavicular joint, we took the reference point as the lateral end of the clavicle. Similar to this one, we can observe the movements of CMC joint at the head of the metacarpals. Okay, not at the tail, not at the base region. It's difficult to see the movement at this region. So, with respect to the motion, we have to remember from 2nd to 5th metacarpal, the mobility increases. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th metacarpals are what type of joint? They are plain synovial joint. 5th one is a saddle shaped joint. Since it's a plain synovial joint, we know that it has only 1 degree of freedom, that is flexion and extension. Since it's a saddle shaped joint, it can have 2 degrees of freedom, that is flexion, extension, and slight amount of abduction, adduction. Now, if we look more closely into this aspect, we see that 2nd and 3rd metacarpal at the CMC joint, the movement is almost negligible, or we cannot have a we cannot see that movement in a great depth. So you can literally say that 2nd and 3rd metacarpals are carpometacarpal joints are immobile. 2nd and 3rd carpometacarpal joints are immobile. 4th one has some mobility, and 5th one has a greater amount of mobility. 4th and 5th one has a mobility. 5th one is having the greatest amount of mobility in the CMC joint of the fingers. Am I right? So we told that there is flexion and extension. What I mean here is that flexion and extension at the 2nd CMC, 3rd CMC is a little difficult to precipitate or look into, and thus we can say that it is relatively immobile. 4th and 5th one is more mobile, 5th one is having the max mobility. And of course there is a functional significance for the less mobility of the 2nd and 3rd, and you can see that in this gripping activity, you can see that the 2nd and 3rd CMC is almost acting as a stable base for the thumb and the index finger to come together, So that may be the reason for the less mobility in the second and third metacarpal. I hope that was sufficient for today's session, and this sort of discussion is also helpful for you. If it is not, please let me know in the comment section, so that we will wait till the board hour arrives and we'll discuss from that. If it is helpful for you and you can understand the things, I will be most happy about that. And in tomorrow's session or next session, we'll discuss about the palmar arches, which is an important topic with respect to the university examination point of view. And one piece of advice to master the hand complex: don't think that is a tough one. It's of course an easy one. So think it done in that way, and you can master it in the most easiest manner. So if you like the video, don't forget to click the like button and kindly subscribe to our channel and share with your